It's been about a month now since PreSonus debuted their new Quantum lineup of interfaces, and while there are a number of review videos out already, I wanted to cover some of the things I haven't seen anyone talk about yet, addressing things like preamp noise and round-trip latency. And while I'm not a scientific measurements guy, I'll do my best to cover everything I can so that from one musician to another, I can help you make a better purchasing decision. Today, I have both ends of the spectrum as we take a look at the entry-level, most affordable interface in the lineup, the $229 ES2, and the top-of-the-line flagship model, the $999 HD8. Let's compare them both and find out which one may be right for you. If after watching you found value in this video, consider not only hitting that subscribe button and notification bell, but using my links in the description to help my channel grow. Now, I think with so many content creators, from YouTubers to streamers, the vast majority out there are more interested in affordable interfaces, so let's start off with the ES2, which is going to solve what most of you out there need. Now, this is a portable desktop-oriented unit with all the controls on top, lit up with the PreSonus signature blue. It has a 24-bit 192 kHz resolution, up to 120 dB dynamic range, supports loopback, is USB-C bus powered, and also includes a 6-month subscription to Studio One Plus. It's housed in a metal matte chassis and has a solid build, especially when compared to some of the competition's plastic-oriented bodies. On the front, we've got an instrument input, which is co-designed by Fender, so should excel for those recording guitar, and a single headphone jack, which sounds pretty great in my opinion, much louder than other headphone outputs I've heard. In fact, I only needed to turn it up to about 11 o'clock. Any louder would be too excessive for these old ears. On the back from left to right, we've got your power button, a 3.5mm MIDI input and output, a USB aux, your USB-C to PC port, 2 balanced TRS main monitor outputs, and 2 mic preamp line inputs, which consist of PreSonus's new Max HD preamps that can pump out up to 75 dB of gain, so you can kiss those cloud lifters goodbye. On the top, we've got a 48-volt phantom power button to power your condenser microphones, and an auto gain button, which if you press the input you want to record, and then press auto gain, will ask you to perform for 10 seconds while it measures your volume and sets your gain to the perfect recording level. We then have inputs 1 and 2 LED meters and selectable buttons, your main output stereo LED meter with a mute button underneath, a clickable multifunction big knob and coder, and a main and headphone button so you can select what volume the big knob controls. Now, one of the big selling points with PreSonus, and this applies to both interfaces, is that PreSonus custom builds its own low latency drivers, so while these new Quantum interfaces are no longer using Thunderbolt like the previous generation, you're still going to get solid latency numbers. Here are the results for the ES2. One thing I've seen asked a lot, and something I forgot to mention about those Max HD preamps, and this goes for every unit in this Quantum lineup, is that yes, you can bypass the preamps by plugging in a TRS cable, so if you've got external preamps or compressors, you can go straight into the converters and not color the signal. Let's jump into the flagship Quantum HD8, which is a rack-mountable unit with tons of connectivity aimed at the more seasoned and serious musician. This unit has a 32-bit 192 kHz resolution, up to 124 dB dynamic range, still supports loopback, is also USB-C, and includes a 12-month subscription to Studio One Plus alongside a perpetual license, so you'll always have Studio One Professional. It's also housed in a matte metal chassis, has a thick front plate, and I appreciate that the body isn't as deep as other rack-mountable interfaces I've owned, which means more ventilation for anything I place directly underneath it in my rack. On the front from left to right, we've got 2 instrument inputs for your guitars. Once again, these are co-developed by Fender, and 2 reamp outputs so you can send a dry pre-recorded guitar signal to an external amplifier for more processing. We then have input buttons for your 8 preamps located on the back of the unit, and a 48-volt phantom power and auto gain button. We then have a full-color LED display alongside your big knob encoder, which when pressed can switch between screens so you can view your input levels, output levels, ADAT input levels, or ADAT output levels. Next to that are your main and mute buttons and an LED meter that displays your main output level. And finally, we have 2 headphone output jacks with buttons and a power button, and while I'm sure some of you would prefer volume knobs, it's as easy as pressing the headphone button so the big knob turns green and turning it to control the volume from there. Click main again if you want to switch back to your monitors. On the back we have your power connector, a total of 4 ADAT connections which consist of 2 in and 2 out for a total of 16 channels, a USB-C to PC port, a MIDI/SPDIF connector port which is used with the included cable to connect whatever you need, and a word clock in and out. We then have 10 DC coupled balanced stereo outputs so you can connect multiple sets of monitors, synthesizers, effects units, or pedals, and then 8 of PreSonus's Max HD preamps, which once again can provide up to 75 dB of gain and bypass the internal preamps should you have external gear. Personally, I would have liked to have at least one of those preamps on the front instead of 4 instrument connections, but that's just my workflow, and I understand why PreSonus and Fender went that way. Having those 2 reamp outputs is unique to the Quantum HD interfaces as far as I know, and while the ES and HD interfaces have similar internals, they both use Max HD preamps, both have low noise AKM converters, and use custom-built low latency drivers. Let's go ahead and run RTL utility again to see what we get. Another thing people have asked about is the preamp noise, and while I don't have the tools to get a scientific measurement, I wanted to provide something, so I maxed out the volume knobs on the ES2 and HD8 with nothing connected, and here's what I picked up. As you can hear, even though they both use the same preamps, the HD8 has lower noise, at least in this scenario, but honestly, preamp noise is something that's blown out of proportion. It's not going to affect you if you're setting your gain correctly, and with the auto gain feature, it's really not a concern. One other great feature I want to mention is the Universal Control app, where you can do things like manage your hardware drivers, access and change parameters with monitor mixing and loopback, and control individual track functions like phantom power, auto gain, and volume. And the best part is you can not only download it to your computer, but install it on your tablet or phone and use it like a remote control. It doesn't matter if you're on Apple, Android, or Windows. It all works together seamlessly and integrates into Studio One. Now, it's been a long time since I've used other DAWs, but I don't think you can get this experience anywhere else. That's the rundown on the Quantum ES2 and HD8. Feel free to drop any questions or comments below, and if it's not on my pay grade, maybe PreSonus themselves will answer your question. There are a lot of options when it comes to the ES2 price range, and I feel like with today's technology, as long as you buy based on your connectivity, you really can't go wrong. But there aren't many options in the $1,000 space the HD8 takes up, and if it's on your list, I'd have no problem recommending it as a solid option. If you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up, but that's going to wrap things up for today. I'll see you next time.